So yeah, no, I mean, this truly like the podcast, I just wanted to have interesting conversations with people who I saw online that I thought were cool. I mean, I know you're a vegan. I'm not necessarily a vegan. I was for 2 years, years ago. And yeah, I did want to preface the Greeks have a phrase, there's two ways to have conversations. One is called the philosophia, which is like the love of wisdom, curiosity. And then there's the Philonikeia, which is like the god of victory, right? And so
Hmm.
I'm not here to like win or debate really.
Hmm.
I like your page, even, I don't follow your diet necessarily, but I like your page. You talk about really interesting stuff, and I just wanted to have a cool conversation. I'm not really here to convince anyone of anything, so I should preface
Likewise.
that.
Likewise.
Yeah.
And I'm also of the idea, of course I've settled on the vegan diet, both of us have, but it's not a black and white topic. There's so many, like even my MMA coach, he's a regenerative farmer. And when you get into like stuff like that, I know you're super into, getting from the local farmer and stuff. When you get into the more nuance of that, scalability, et cetera, the topic goes deep. And so I'm here to again learn from you, hear your full perspective, and of course get into. I'm curious about your experience on the vegan diet, but yeah, I'm excited to get into it. With that being said, let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, I mean, my history with the vegan diet, I would say like in high school, I think like a lot of people, you're when you're a child, you're just eating the food that your parents or whoever your school puts in front of you. There's not really any intention behind it. And so when I got to the age of about, I think I was 16, 17, somewhere around there, I saw I forget the name of it. It was one of the famous vegan documentaries on Netflix.
Game.
And it wasn't Game Changers, it was slightly before that, but it
What
was
that
around that same era.
was it about health, ethics, performance?
A little bit of everything,
Hmm.
a lot of environmental. I'll find it and I can
Maybe
maybe
what
put
the
it on the
health.
screen.
I think it might be what the health. Is that
I
like a
think it is.
burger?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Burger on
yeah, yeah,
that burger? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That should be it. And for the first time in my life, I just thought about food differently. Actually, I should preface a few months, year before that, I was getting into like the classic, weight training, bodybuilding. I was like 16 and just like looking to improve my sport. And I was like, eat protein, take creatine, that kind of basic stuff. So that being said, I watched this documentary. It kind of blew my world open a little bit because I was like, for the first time, I started thinking about food as something that affects, let's say my soul, the environment at large, and of course my physical, material health. And so I just kind of went with that. I found the documentary very moving, and so I ran with it for 2 years. At the time, I was a very, like a granola kid. Like I lived in Florida, but I was rock climbing a lot, and so I liked being outdoors, just kind of intertwined with that kind of community. But ended up like after 2 years, I started becoming a professional chef in high-end kitchens. And so really having any diet at all was kind of didn't really align with my career needs at the time. So I just kind of slowly phased out of it. But yeah.
What was your as far as so for you right now? I'm curious of like what's your philosophy on because I know you're everything meat, vegetables, all of it. And like diet's a big part of your page. Where have you landed as far as the diet you eat and why you feel like that's the most aligned for you?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I've been someone, I think like a lot of people in the modern world, I've had over the last several years had a bit of a roller coaster with, unhealth and health. It's finally kind of stuck with me and I feel like I've reached a maturity in it where it isn't like an intense fad thing. It's like just something sustainable that, I can do. And so I've dabbled in lots of different diets, whether it, be like the carnivore stuff, the raw stuff, the vegan, and a few other things in between. But today, I mean, I think you've seen on my page, like, I really try to just not eat at grocery stores as much as possible. Here and there, it happens. But I try to just have what my local farmer has, and I've built a really good relationship with him. So that's a lot of raw milk and eggs. And then every few months we'll do like a quarter cow and we eat the quarter cows and I'm in Colorado. So the growing season through the winter, there isn't really much fruit or veg around me at all. And so I haven't eaten that much through the winter. It's more been like stews, like vegetables, hearty vegetables, things like that.
Yeah.
But that is changing now. Farmers markets are opening, starting to get lots of fruit and veg. So I try to eat seasonally. That kind of makes sense to me. But yeah, I mean, it's not really necessarily like a hard cut thing.
Yeah. So what's your main? Because Joe just kind of invited me on this. We were working together, so I don't actually know
Yeah,
your
yeah.
all your page or
No, I'm
anything.
glad you're here. Thanks for coming.
What's like your main message? Like if you had to summarize.
Eating with intention is really important. I think this is a poor summary. It's going to be long-winded, so forgive me. But eating with intention is obviously really important. I mean, I think in every religion, food is really intertwined with it. You know, fasting, certain religions don't eat meat, you know, or certain periods of the time they don't eat meat, etc., etc. This year I started going to Orthodox liturgy, a Greek Orthodox church, and so there's been lots of fasting in that, and I find it powerful. And so I think about it in the same way I do, I guess, with any of like the passions, the bodily passions in like a religious sense, whether it be lust or, you know, in this case, like gluttony with food or like that. I don't think any of them are bad in and of itself. It's like a relationship issue, and it has to do with your intention and what you're moving towards. And so, you know, in the case of food, I think it's important to get out of the grocery stores because I don't think eating anything industrially farmed, whether it be meat, whether it be vegetables, dairy or milk, whatever, grains, is going to be very good in the grocery store. There's some small exceptions, right? Some good brands. But I think where I've kind of landed is the best thing I can do is kind of just try to leave that system. I see a lot of people arguing within those kind of four walls, whether it be like eat fruit, eat meat, da 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 da, and you're all shopping at Walmart, you know, and it's just like it's kind of like the illusion of choice. And so, yeah, my thing now is trying to leave that kind of convenience that, you know, let's say the forces at play that are trying to farm us or harvest our energy, whatever,
Mm.
have selected for us, and it'd be super convenient. So yeah, that's kind of where I've landed. Is I know it's a bit vague, so
As far as so I know you DM me kind of asking about some of the stuff I talk about. Was there something like some questions you had for me as far as like because I was we were both carnivore. We were hard carnivore, you know, for my entire conscious adult life. And so
nice.
recently, and so like a year and a half.
Well, not full carnivore. We just
No, yeah,
yeah.
but like carnivore, mostly meat, basically
Yeah,
meat
meat based.
meat based, and then I did
We were
carnivore.
full carnivore for a bit.
We needed the carbs for sure.
Yeah.
But as far as because there's a lot of stuff on my account that you know you said you kind of had questions about. Is there anything you wanted to ask me?
I mean, I less have had specific questions. I just think your content's cool, and I was like, yeah, there's definitely a fun conversation here. And I've just been reaching out to people like mad with the start of this podcast. I'm like, look, there's a bunch of cool people online. Let's have some
Sure.
cool conversations. And so I was going to say, like, the things that piqued my interest, one was talking about Eden, because I mean, I think symbolism is one of my like main interests, I guess. And so symbolism in the Garden of Eden is always something that fascinates me, whether it be food or pride or what have you. But I also love that a lot of the stuff you talk about is consuming things that aren't just matter
Hmm.
in a eating sense. You know, you talk about prana, I believe, breath, grounding, sunlight, which I all find to be really fascinating and important. Because like you see in a lot of the great spiritual leaders, obviously I take the most from Jesus, but you know, a man that can go 40 days without eating in the desert, someone that can resurrect from the dead, has a level of, it's hard to say, like a control over their material body through a vertical, like a more spiritual
Higher
route,
consciousness for sure. Yeah.
higher consciousness. Yeah, yeah. And so, and that isn't just about what you're eating. Generally speaking, I think a lot of people in today's world, we only think about like the material aspects of things where it's like, I eat this, this will happen to my body. And a lot of times I don't think I see people talking about the internal, you know, the internal effects going
Energetic
on.
effect, yeah.
Energetic effects, like even the belief effects. I mean, that's one of the things I've stumbled on in my current understanding of things is that belief plays one of the biggest roles in your health. Like
For sure.
if you truly believe that you think that something is good for you within reason, you know, it can't be like uranium isotope, but like if you believe it's good for you and you ingest it, it has positive implications on your body, on your soul. And I see a lot of people that radiate health saying very different things. Sometimes, you know,
Right.
sometimes the opposite things, which is fascinating.
I think as far as that goes, I think that what like one of my a big point I like to talk about too is the idea that like as far as diet goes, diet plays a pretty big role. But like you take a person who's eating McDonald's on a daily basis who like feels like God has them on a mission and that they're supposed to complete that mission, and they'll be way more energized than the depressed
Mm.
person eating a optimal vegan diet or optimal primal diet. And so I think that and that's belief right there. How you said like belief affects the energetic state. They truly believe they're meant to do something. So I think that's like for sure a baseline of like that's the stem is like feeling like you're on the right path, doing the right things. But let's get into the eating aspect of it. So as far as the eating goes, I mean, in Orthodox, it's like that's God's perfect creation, perfect design. And so like for me, that's one of the biggest aspects of, like from a Christian perspective of saying, hey, right, why were we didn't eat animals and eat it. And obviously, violence is a big aspect of that. If in a perfect design, violence isn't necessary, right? So it's like for you, when you see that, like that God created, had us eat plants and eat in, what is your perspective to say, like, that was why did we eat plants there? But it wouldn't, when we could return to that diet, it wouldn't be the most, why wouldn't we basically eat the Eden diet, the perfect diet if we could?
Yeah, no, 100%. You mentioned, I think, in that video that I DM'd you about, which I loved, that, God did give us permission to eat once we fell from the Garden of Eden. And it's funny, so I have a podcast with my farmer, and we had a podcast that hasn't come out yet about veganism and just thoughts on it, generally speaking, recently, because I find it to be fascinating. Sorry, this is like a sidebar, but have you seen New Earth Fitness on YouTube?
I've not.
I think you guys would really like him. Incredibly based, very esoteric older guy who is extremely jacked. And he lives in a self-sufficient, small, like tropical homestead somewhere. And he's a vegan. And he talks about really esoteric stuff. I think you'd really like him. And this is part of the reason that, because I like this guy so much, and he talks about like Christ consciousness, and essentially he has built a small Eden structure for himself on his homestead where he's fully self-sufficient. And he is, I think, vegan the majority of the time, mostly eating fruit. He has a little bit of everything, he has a lot of herbs because he doesn't want to take any medicine or go to the hospital. So he has like oregano, for oregano oil is like antibacterial, etc. And he only sometimes eats animal products, and I believe it's only milk and eggs every few months. And the rest of the time he says he gives it to his children. And he kind of just goes on an intuitive basis like that, which I
Sure.
find fascinating. I mean, and I know I'm not really answering the Eden question, but what I'm trying to say is I don't think there's any animal on Earth that has a hardcore diet. I've seen a lot of guys on both sides say that there are hardcore herbivores here, or there are hardcore carnivores here that they only eat meat or they only eat plants. But I've seen fairly convincing, I guess, research or just whatever it may be, that all animals are basically opportunistic carnivores or herbivores. So, my dog, for example, she's an Alaskan Malamute, eats mostly meat. And intuitively, when she feels like she needs fiber in her stool, I'll see her eating grass, eating other things like that.
His
And
dog
I
eats
think,
grass.
what is it?
His dog eats grass.
Yeah, yeah. And the wolves do the same thing, right? There's been studies where wolves feel like they need fiber in their gut. They'll go to the undigested grass in the ruminant animals, and they'll eat that first, and they'll also eat grass. Same thing with like certain herbivores like pandas. Obviously, they just eat bamboo, but in certain times when they feel they're nutrient dense, animals aren't conscious like us, and so they can't really leave that animalistic intuition. But even herbivorous animals will eat meat that they can get their hands on
Sure.
very
So
occasionally when they feel like they need it.
not to interrupt, but let's go back to the question of like your point. Humans, like we can't eat both. Like we're opportunistic, right? In the wild and survival, we can digest the meat, we can digest the plants. Going back to the question of like, and I'm not saying we're in an ideal world right now, but why do you think that in an ideal world we eat plants and plants only? As far as in the Bible, in Genesis and Isaiah, also you've probably seen the verse referring to the lion will lay with the lamb in heaven when the knowledge is filled with the Lord. The ox will, or the what is it, the who
Lion live with the lamb.
and then the who will eat grass like the ox. Some like the lion will eat grass like the ox.
I know the one you're talking about. I don't remember it fully either.
So and that's God's ideal world, right? Heaven and Eden. Why do you think in the ideal world we are just plant-based in God's image?
I mean, I don't necessarily want to argue that point because I'm not sure if I agree with the original hypothesis of like in the perfect world we don't eat it. Well, actually, I wouldn't disagree with it. I mean, I don't think Eden was like a physical place that's like this is like recorded history that's been passed down that like and oftentimes the Bible is extremely symbolic. It's showing us patterns of how reality works. Like whether Cain and Abel were two real brothers or they weren't, it doesn't really matter. What it's showing is like a deeply real symbolic pattern that happens within us and within our relationships with other people all the time. And so the only reason I'd be skeptical, I mean, in order to go back to Eden, let's say, and eat just the fruits that God provided in the garden, we would have to return to a pre-fallen psychological, spiritual condition, which I don't know if it's possible. But there's also, in the same way that like, I also think the pattern of Jesus is showing that it's not like he didn't even need food. You know what I'm saying? Like, I do think there is a way to get to a spiritual level of understanding and interfacing with reality that you're not constantly seeking into this animalistic desire to eat food. And I know that's kind of radical, but I'm sure you probably agree.
I talk about that stuff.
But I don't look, I don't know how to do that. I don't, and I don't know if anyone does. Like I'm not Jesus, and so in the meantime, I'm trying to have good intentions with how I eat, but yeah.
And when I ask these questions here, I'm genuinely curious because I mean you're an introspective dude of like, I've had my thoughts on this reading and my ideas, which I'm asking you what your ideas are. So my idea is that I think, the symbol, whether the Eden was actually a thing or it was symbolism, is the reason that we were plant-based in Eden was because in God's ideal world, we don't need to have bloodshed to eat, right? There's no reason to, especially, in the ideal world where he creates these animals with nervous systems, etc. We thrive off of not causing bloodshed, right? And same with heaven, the lion will, even the animals in Eden and in heaven, the symbolism says they don't cause violence. Now, the thing is, and for me, it's like, okay, that makes sense. And I do see that as kind of like nonviolence in every religion. The golden rule, treat others how you want to be treated, is the highest path. And so, in my idea, it's okay, if my diet can match that while also being completely healthy, right? So it's not a necessity, essentially. I mean, you could look at myself, for example, there in research, and then I'm like, so I look at that, I'm like, okay, if that's God's ideal, which makes a lot of sense, and I want to be living the highest path spiritually and physically and ethically, following that seems very aligned with that goal. And that's my perspective there, and I'm curious to your thoughts if you agree, disagree with what I just said.
No, I do genuinely agree with what you're saying. I mean, I'd be curious, like, I mean, I would say I see like a general hierarchy within diets, and I don't mean a hierarchy of like good versus bad, but like within the structure of, let's say, like the bloodshed aspect, right? Like at the top, you'd have something like a primal carnivore guy, a raw primal carnivore guy. They're trying to simulate like just killing an animal, not even cooking it. And then you've got, cooked, whatever. And then it's like pescatarian. And as you go down, it's killing the things that are less like you. And actually, not to get super dark, but you could put above the primal carnivore guy some of like the PDFs in certain files released this year, eating the thing closest to us, like that's kind of the same thing as eating a cow. It's a similar pattern. It's getting closer to you, right? And so as you go down, it's like pescatarian, you're eating fish, and they're kind of like these living creatures, but they're very different.
Right.
And then
vegetarian.
I would be curious, vegetarian, vegan, fruitarian,
liquidarian, breatharian, and then I think
is there breatharian?
Yeah, that's what you were saying in the sense of Jesus and stuff, and
right.
Like our ideal bodies are able to live off just the prana in the air if we're completely pure. But keep going on what you were saying to me, Nero.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to say, well, like, what's your feelings of, like, in the same way that you are not destroying the plant when you take its fruit, right? Because it freely gives the fruit and it doesn't hurt the plant when you pick it. If in the same way that like, if you're going to eat a certain vegetable, like you're pulling out its roots. And so in the same way, how do you feel about like, let's say the fruit of animals, like whether it be milk or eggs or maybe shearing a sheep for wool? Also things that don't necessarily create bloodshed, but
Yeah.
they give it,
I
they
would
offer
say
it at least.
I would say if what you're doing isn't causing an animal unnecessary suffering, I don't see a problem with it. That's my personal. And some vegans would disagree with that in the sense of say, hey, having a sheep, would say like it's belief we shouldn't exploit animals. And it's like, okay, if I have a sheep, give it a great life, and I don't kill it before it needs to be killed. Don't cause it unnecessary suffering, the shearing, whatever. I don't really find that immoral, but I find I say, hey, if I'm going to cause this animal suffering for a purpose that is not necessary for my survival and my thriving, but more for a hedonistic reason, then, under my moral code, which is like, I strive for, which is treat others how I want to be treated, it doesn't fit within that framework.
Yeah.
And so that's why like especially factory farm dairy is just like it's pretty unjustifiable. I think you'd agree with that, the way that cows are treated, what we do to them, especially like milk wasn't even made for us in the first place in God's creation. And then there's probably ways to get the milk that is more ethical, but I would still say that if regardless you have to take the baby away from the mother, any profitable farmer, in order for the cow to be profitable, unless you're paying an insane amount for milk, has to take the baby away from the mother at some point. And I've researched all the ones around me to see that, like the earliest one in Wisconsin, which is about 2 hours from me, the most ethical one. All right, is she kicking us out? Is there a person waiting? Okay, thank you. One second. So the most ethical one was, okay, after we let the baby be with a week and a half and then we take the baby, right? So inevitably, in the consumption of dairy, there's unnecessary animal suffering there. And it's like, for me, it's like, okay, if I don't have to cause that and I don't need it to thrive, then like personally, it doesn't fit in within.
I'm sorry, the connection got bad and I missed your last point.
1 second. It says it's trying to reconnect still. Okay, there we go. I'll finish this point and then we'll I have to get out of this room. It will be like 20 seconds. But is that it doesn't.
Nice, welcome back.
Yeah, it's like as far as your because like I think the ethics aspect is where it really gets interesting. Like we could talk about the health, go back and forth with the studies as much as possible, but this one is the one where like I feel like the philosophy really comes in. So as far as like what I said there, like what's your idea as far as an animal's worth? How do we justify harming it? Where's the justification and where's the line drawn? Like I don't know if you've thought about it a lot. You were vegan for a little bit, but where have you kind of come? Where have you landed in the ethics of it?
It's hard to say. Yeah, no, I do agree. I'm not here to like argue science or studies. I find that stuff honestly boring. And so
Me too.
my take on, I think I kind of mentioned it earlier, is pretty much I view everything as relational and I view humans as meaning-oriented creatures. Like you were saying, like the guy moving towards his God's purpose, eating McDonald's, is gonna probably be fine because what's the most important thing is you're moving towards your meaning. And I think that's maybe the most important thing for humans because as far as I can see, I've seen every kind of dude do every kind of diet and they all seemingly look to be really healthy. I mean, given that, it's on the internet, people could just be spamming roids or peptides or what have you, and it's like, okay, whatever.
You could tell in the eyes if someone's
right,
healthy.
Right. And I mean healthy in not just a physical way, because I do think a lot of people on the internet obsess over the physical aspect of health, but then they're cheating on their wife, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like a relationship between all of these things that help you move towards your purpose and your human purpose, which, is something like, making the world a better place for others, which could be including animals. And so as long as I don't feel myself getting lost, let's say lost in my flesh, lost in my animalistic desires, like I mentioned sex earlier, it's not like I don't think it's a bad thing to have sex, but if you're just having sex out of pure just lust for pleasure with a bunch of people all the time, it's not good, right? It should be right, yeah, like the purpose should be with your wife in order to procreate, to make a family, to create an extension of your body that, proceeds into the future generations, and so whatever takes me away from that is what is bad. It's not necessarily the act itself.
So as far as well, let's break it down here. So would you say that like the way the animals are treated industrially in factory farms, would you say like supporting that would be
Yeah,
immoral?
yeah.
Okay,
100%. I have no disagreement. Like I truly,
I figured.
yeah. I truly think industrial farming is abhorrent for in every single aspect.
For sure. So I'm gonna kind of like I'm gonna just kind of like dig deep a little bit and
Yeah,
see
yeah.
like for with the philosophy. And I'm talking a little quieter because I'm not in a study room anymore. But okay, so why would you say that like that's immoral to support what goes on there?
I mean, the reason we call it industrial farming is, the Industrial Revolution was the first time in human history we mechanized things in a way for hyper efficiency of output for profit. And so I don't think nature or anything should ever be maximized mechanically for whatever output it's producing.
Sure.
That can never be good. And so, I mean, no, industrial farming was the reason I went vegan in the first place. I saw the factories. There's no question in my mind that it's horrible for the world, the environment. It's horrible for the people consuming it. It's horrible for the animals, of course. Yeah, like all of the above. And so, yeah, no disagreement. I mean, again, it goes to the relationship. Like part of being a living organism, living in your ecosystem. Like there's a reason we don't think a lion is evil necessarily because he goes and, let's say kills a gazelle. Because they're only killing when they need to, and the rest of the time they sleep like 20 hours a day. They're not creating gazelle farms that they can just, become obese on, right? And so, yeah, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah, it does. And so as far as like humans, right? If in the sense of okay, necessity justifies maybe killing an animal, right? For I would say so. If I was in a survival situation, I wouldn't really think twice. Yeah, it would hurt, but when there's lack of necessity for survival or even thrival, are we justified to take an animal's life?
On the one hand, I want to say no. On the other hand, I want to say a lot of people, I mean, and that's the reason I think both of us are creating content in order to help people think about this stuff maybe more. It goes, I think, with intention a lot of time. I don't blame the regular guy buying some ground beef at the grocery store for him and his family. I don't view him as an evil person as
Hmm.
much as I do the people behind the creation of the factories, because his intention is to feed his family.
Right.
So I guess it gets confusing for me. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't really have a clear answer for that. I
So
mean,
here, I'll ask you this. So it's like,
yeah,
I agree. So it's like my battle isn't veganism versus non-veganism. I've landed in the veganism idea because it aligns with me and what I believe. You know, I personally believe God wants us to eat that way. Everyone's subject to their own ideas, but my real battle and your battle as well is the ignorance versus consciousness, right? Helping people become fully conscious, and from that place, they're going to have their own thoughts and ideas. Now, you take that same person who would go to the grocery store and buy the factory farm beef from the grocery store, right? And you say, okay, he's not a bad person, and I agree because he's not conscious of what he's doing. Essentially, he's not conscious that by the process of him buying that meat is directly funding the abuse, essentially torture of these animals, right?
mm,
Now, if he's conscious of it, say, hey, I'm deciding to buy this knowing that I'm supporting this when I could reach my hand over. And we don't have to get into the logistics of like plant-based meats. Some are better than others. There's some phenomenal ones, some awful ones. But whether that's tofu, whether that's any other plant-based option, choosing the beef, which the factory farm beef is going to be unhealthier than tofu. Like the research shows that, right? Instead of choosing the tofu, is he immoral saying, hey, I'm going to choose for to pay for that animal to be abused, tortured, and slaughtered because I like the way it tastes when I could pick a healthier and cheaper option, which is tofu? Now, if he's fully conscious of that, would that be considered immoral?
yeah. I mean, if you know something to be bad and you do it anyway, that is when it becomes immoral. But like, not to be tricky, but like in that same, it kind of goes back to the belief question of a lot of people, you can tell them that, factory farming is bad. You can tell them that there is studies that tofu is better. but then they're not going to believe it, you know? Because
Yeah.
like let's say like all the scientific information is out, there's still a split. There's still a split in the people that read it, and I don't necessarily know why. I think it's fascinating, but two people are going to draw two different conclusions. And yes, the one that believes it, who sees that study and goes, ah, yes. I mean, yes, that's kind of like a picture of the Garden of Eden in and of itself. It's like, don't do this thing, then they take the thing, then they're in a fallen place. I mean, you can track the story of the Garden of Eden into like just a simple decision process that people have every day. It's like, let's say it's like fapping, for example. It's like, I know fapping is bad for me.
Sure.
You give in, you do it, you're now in this lower fallen world,
Yeah.
in a little microcosm within your
Yeah.
within your soul. And so
For sure. So you would say, as far as like you said, basically there's a lot of these people are unknowingly committing an immoral act, which is paying for like awful mistreatment of these animals. So would you consider that immoral, saying like funding? Because have you seen the footage of like the way these animals are treated in the factory farms?
yeah, no, yeah. I
Yeah.
saw those, and I mean, it's abhorrent. Like, I mean,
Yeah. So would you say that funding that would be what like, if you knew about it and knew exactly what you're doing, say, hey, I'm paying for that because I like the way it tastes, would you consider that immoral?
yeah, if you're doing it purely for the way you like it tastes, I mean, that is what the intention you're moving towards is pleasure of food,
Right.
right? And so like
Right.
that isn't good. But like you have to imagine let's say you're a young father and you're maybe not you have a busy work life. Obviously, people get busy, etc. You're stressed out. And you're just trying to do what's best for your kid. You see that these factory farms are treating their animals like this, but you don't want to necessarily put your child through a position where in your mind it's a bit of this experiment. You don't necessarily want to risk their health. You know what
Sure.
I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Because
So
like that's like a question a lot of times. It's like I would put myself on the vegan diet, but sometimes people might have reservations. Like I'm curious, like would you make your kids vegan, for example?
100%.
Because yeah, I mean it's tricky. Like
So what I would say is that, like, we've both done research and we've both read the literature. I'm not here to say that, like, maybe physically, especially locally raised grass fed meat can be healthy for sure. Can be part of a healthy diet. Can a vegan diet also be optimal? Yes. Can a diet with a little bit of meat, in my opinion, be optimal? I think so, for health, right? Now, the fact is that we don't need to eat meat, right? That's just a fact. To be healthy, trust me, brother, I've done the research, and you probably have too. You probably know that we don't have to eat it to be fully healthy. Now, if that's the truth, whether people know the truth or not, like that dad, right? So 98% of people eat meat. Those 98% of people, say 90% of them don't know the health facts, don't know what happens at the factory farms, so they're ignorant. Not 90% of them are living in ignorance, right? Now, say the other 8%, we'll say 1% of people actually only shop at local foods like you, right? So we'll say the other 7% of people are aware of the atrocity they're committing and the fact they don't need to be committing it, right? They're choosingly living in immorality. Now, those other 90% of people, are they doing something immoral that they don't know? Or like, what would you consider that? As far as is not knowing something's immoral, but the act of it's immoral, which is the animal abuse and torture, is partaking in it or choosing to live in ignorance immoral?
Is choosing to live in ignorance immoral? Yeah, yes, but at the same time, there's infinite knowledge in the universe, and I think it would be unfair to expect everyone to be as wise on everything. Like, for example, like there's probably things that you or I haven't looked into. Maybe I'm wrong. That have massive impacts on the world. Like I'm trying to think of an example. Like I have a pretty good idea of how the iPhone is made or the laptop I'm using, and like there's a moral implication into almost anything you buy from the modern world that isn't probably good. Like let's say like the diamond engagement ring that you get for
Sure.
your this diamond engagement ring you get for your fiance was mined in a horrible diamond mine where there's slaves working. Or you go to a World Cup game and the stadium was built by slaves that died.
Sure.
Or you visit the Great Pyramids and, slaves died. Whatever. There comes a point where I think the over optimization or the over obsession with morality can kind of cause a paralysis in people. At least maybe I'm just speaking from my own experience. Then it's like, fuck, I can't do anything but go live in the woods and die. It becomes nihilistic quickly. So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, with I agree. Like, and there's things like, for example, say, someone, one of those workers for this laptop, was a slave and had to put 3 hours of work in the laptop. Could you say it's immoral? But could you also say, hey, that the work they put in this laptop is the what I'm going to get out of it is worth more than the time and the conditions they were in for the time being? Who knows, right? Nor is anyone asking anyone to not eat or not use a laptop. So, but however, with the animal agriculture, we're talking about 80 billion land animals and 1 to 2 trillion aquatic animals killed for food each year, right? That's no small number. 80 billion is a crazy amount, right? And so that's something that's like the actual, and of course we don't put animals on the level of humans as far as value, but like that's something that we can't even comprehend as far as like 3,000 animals per second, right? And so with that, it's a change of saying, hey, instead of paying for this directly to happen, because I don't think eating meat is wrong, right? I think that causing unnecessary animal suffering, personally, within my moral framework, unnecessary animal suffering, causing that, I don't think is right, right? And so with that, you have the ability to not do it, right, just by just eating something else. And so it's like, and the local farm, regenerative farm, that's where it gets nuanced, right? For the industrial farming, it's not very nuanced.
Right, no, for sure. Yeah.
Most people can look at that and say, no, that's like, you can't justify that for taste. But however, would you say
And
that,
like I would like happily argue, like I've made this point to like primal guys, like I would happily argue that like I don't agree with that,
yeah. And so, but would you say, like, within your moral framework, would you say causing unnecessary animal suffering, meaning not necessary for thrival or survival, is, and I haven't gotten clear if you think meat is necessary for thriving, but if it were not necessary for health, right, would causing unnecessary animal suffering be immoral to you?
Yeah. But it comes to the word unnecessary, right? Like I mentioned this guy. I actually hope you look him up because I think you'll think he's really
I
cool.
did. I already did.
Okay, tight. Yeah, dude, listen to, I think it's like he clickbaits it as some kind of like looks maxing, bone development and facial structure, and then he just talks about like Christ consciousness, like talking with your cells through your own spirit, and like completely doesn't go in that direction. And it was,
That's hilarious. Clickbait.
dude, it was dope. Not Peak Earth. That's Case's podcast. New Earth Fitness.
So I want to hear from you though. Would you say, do you think that meat is necessary for thriving?
In the case of that guy, he is vegan most of the time. That being said, I think the environments people live in is really important. He is in the middle of nowhere, fully surrounded by nature, the ocean, negative charged ions, no 5G, no air pollution. There's probably some, but you can't escape it. And he doesn't eat meat the majority of the time. He says every few months he intuitively feels like a lack in a certain regard, and he has chickens and he has animals. So he'll have some milk, some goat's milk or sheep's milk. I forget what he has. I think it's goats, and some chickens. And then the rest of the time he only gives that to his children, and he just eats basically.
Like for
Yeah.
health. Yeah, those once every 2 months he thinks it's necessary.
Yeah, and he doesn't have like an exact number, and that's where I think like the unnecessary suffering there is really the key, because like you said, if you're in a survival situation, like that's fairly easily justifiable as necessary. And like,
Of course.
and the thing is, like, I felt great when I first started eating vegan because I was doing like what was popular at the time, which was whole foods plant-based, which is
Right.
just basically eating single ingredients, whether it be cooked, whether it be raw, from plants. And that was fantastic for me because that was just basically an elimination diet from all of the Western slop. And that was great. And so I felt incredible. After a while, I didn't. And so
How long?
probably around a year, to where I started to lose. And there's no way to tell what that is, right? And then I started to eat like more of the processed stuff because I was like, oh, maybe I should just like,
Lazy.
right, exactly. And that's just slop for vegans. Like that's,
Yeah. So here's what I would, and I'm going into the meat of it, and I'm asking you. I would say, and you would probably agree, a lot of the amount of meat you eat, I don't know how much you eat, but some of it would be unnecessary for health, right? For like health purposes, in the sense of you don't need to be eating as much as you are, right? And I'm asking this for philosophical reasons, for the sake of the debate. Would you agree that you don't need to be eating as much animal products as you are for health, or would you say yes or no to that?
I would say I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's obviously not, that's unhelpful, but
Well, how much meat do you eat? Would you say, do you have steak at every meal, or what's that look like?
it depends. Right now, we're in between getting a quarter or a half cow from my farm. Usually when I have a stocked freezer, I'm probably eating about a pound or a little less of meat a day.
Okay. So would you say that a pound of meat is necessary for optimal health a day?
I don't know. Like I mean, like I said, I want to eat from my local surrounding area and farms. That's really been my goal, is to leave the grocery store.
Hmm.
Because I do believe that eating a pound of the meat from the farmer that I know, and I visit his cows and I feed them and I pet them, I go in the field with them. I know that eating those cows is better than the monocropped fruit or veg from the grocery store near me. Like, it's obvious, like the moral implications of eating factory farmed meat. It's less obvious eating the implications of monocropped factory farmed fruit and veg. I mean, I view that as equally as horrible. It
For your health,
destroys
or for morals?
both because, like, I mean, you can go like I like eating pineapple, right? When I'm in a tropical climate.
Right.
Sorry, before I get sidetracked. Where I am in the winter, my local farms don't have fruit and veg, and so it is necessary for me to eat what they have, and that's going to be like foods that are dried that can be preserved through the winter. I mean, my goal one day is to have my own farm, and this is where you can eat less meat, is when you're looking into the future. You can preserve grains, you can dry things, but to eat fresh fruit and vegetable in Colorado for 4 months out of the year, maybe a little more, isn't possible. And so the animal
Wait, like
product,
you don't have like a Whole Foods around you or anything that like that ships in like
I
high
do, I do,
quality?
I do. But that's like, that's my, and I know this isn't like the usual person you would talk to like this. Like I'm trying to not go to Whole Foods, right? Like
Mm,
I that's that's really
sure,
my biggest thing is
sure.
like I
So
don't think supporting Amazon is going to be good, even if it's like fruit.
let's so I'm glad I got that perspective from you of like, and I don't think that your way of life is bad or immoral. But what I would ask you is, I want to get clear on like what you view as immoral. So you would say, because most people have access to everything they need, all the fruits, all the vegetables, whether that's from their local farmer or Whole Foods, whatever. Would you say eating more meat than is necessary for thrival, so it gets to the point where it's more for pleasure, whether that's locally raised, whatever it is immoral?
Yeah, I mean, look, brother, I'll be honest, like I want to get a little past like the yes or no questions.
Well, here's the thing: is you have to. I agree, but you have to have a moral framework, a moral groundwork, where you say it is like, this is what I think you should and shouldn't do. Otherwise, you have no, because like the law, the golden rule, right? Treat others how you want to be treated. That is the moral framework and groundedness, which like every human kind of spiritually strives for, right? No matter what religion you're in. And so, like for me, in this situation of eating an animal, if like my moral framework is unnecessary suffering for pleasure can't be justified, right? And you would agree with that. That's like a yes or no, right? And so for me, like that's what I feel like a lot of people come to that conclusion, which is that, hey, yeah, I agree. Like unnecessarily harming an animal when we don't have to, right? Depending on health, right? Because for you, your idea is that you need it for health. That fits within your moral framework, and I respect that. For most people, it doesn't, in the sense of they eat way more meat than they should, or they eat factory farm meat, or they know that you don't need it for health, they eat it anyways. And so it's like this 80 billion number. If everyone was living like you, eating from a local farmer, there'd be way less habitat destruction, way better health. People would probably eat more sparingly just because it wouldn't be so industrialized. Except if we would both, I think it looks like we both agree that a majority of the world is living, is committing something that's an abomination to God.
Yes, yeah, I mean, but we are living in like cities and cultures and jobs that are all abominations as well. And so it's a tricky thing to say to a person living in such a fallen state,
Hmm.
to then tell them you need to treat this one aspect of your life like the Garden of Eden. I think
Well,
it's
in this
tricky.
in this aspect, the reason it is because it's affecting something else, right?
Hmm.
Like what you do to yourself, like lust, is a sin against yourself, right? Like adultery in your mind, the sin against yourself. And the reason that veganism is the implications are different is because you're bestowing upon your will on another creature, right? And
Hmm.
so that's why the topic is so, is such a big one, and it's so like heated between both sides, and it's like we're both a mix of both. We're both in the middle there, right? So where it's like we're leaning towards consciousness. I don't think it's black and white, but we both think that it's abomination what we do to these animals. Now, if you live in your own sin against yourself to the sense of like you just are lustful, you're greedy, you're gluttonous, all the seven deadly sins. Yeah, that's bad and that's abomination to God. But when it gets to another human being or another creature, bestowing your will on them, that's where it gets like, even more tricky. Because I mean, the unforgivable sin, what is it in Christianity?
I'm not sure.
Turning people away from God,
Okay.
right? Turning people against God. Because when it comes to someone else, when you lead someone else towards sin, right? That's a true abomination. So that's why it's like okay, our actions affect the suffering of another creature. That's where it gets tricky, right?
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. But there's this dance between, let's say, the rules and our intentions. Because, I mean, I've gathered from this conversation, obviously you're a Christian, I take it.
Yeah, I'm a Gnostic Christian in a sense, and not super dogmatic, but I'm very like esoteric like you in my views. But yeah, I believe in Jesus and his teachings. However they were translated through so many years or so many different sects, who knows? But I believe in the baseline teachings essentially of Jesus. Yes.
You would call yourself a Gnostic?
Yeah, in the sense of, hey, I look at the world and I see that, like even at you said in the beginning of this, is that, the beings or the higher ups feeding off our energy. Are you aware of the Gnostic view?
Vaguely, yes. Yeah, I mean, like Gnosis, I mean, from my understanding, a lot of the early Gnostic movement, I find fascinating that it's having a resurgence today because it was a very early Christian movement.
Was.
And I would say I don't know a great deal about it, but I have a gut level mistrust of it because I think from my observation, it tends people to lead to people denying the flesh too much. Like
Hmm.
there's a denial of the flesh that I think is super necessary, but you have to remember like when Jesus resurrected from the dead, one of the first things he said was, "I'm hungry. Like, do you guys have food?" You know? And also like the insistence of Jesus being man, like fully God but fully man. And so there does have to, like, we do have to deny our flesh and our passions. Otherwise, you just fall into this animalistic way of living, which is lower than what we really are.
Right.
But
So,
I
well,
see issues when people deny it so much that they're like, this world doesn't matter, this body doesn't matter, only this like spiritual afterlife or world is the true reality. And I can see that also leading to a lot of devastation down the line, if that makes sense.
right. So do you know what gnosis means?
Like to move toward God or like become.
So it's spiritual understanding or spiritual knowledge through
Okay.
experience, right? So
Mm.
it's not through what you read in a book, it's through, direct revelation, communication, relationship, essentially with the higher power. So that's what Gnosticism is. There's a lot of different ideas of Gnosticism. Now, the baseline idea overall of Gnosticism is that the fallen world we live in was not created by a benevolent being, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
For a lot of reasons, you could make that assumption. And also, the purpose of this world is essentially, like you said, kind of like a farm to essentially like feed off our souls, right? Like you said earlier. Now, I'm not settled in with the Gnostic view, but the thing about the Gnostic view is I've never done mental gymnastics to make it work in my experience, right? to where it's like, hey, this doesn't logically make sense, or doesn't everything, all circles aren't closed. But what about this? It doesn't really make sense. So for me, the only way where it doesn't make sense is, okay, where did this creator, this, devil who made this material realm, where did he come from? That's the one where it's like, who knows? But if you look at the idea that we have these material desires, if we follow our flesh, our innate desires, we lead to depression, suffering, etc. Also, you look at the animal kingdom, right? Why do animals eat other animals? Like, who would create that design to say, hey, I'm going to make a design where in order for this animal to survive, they have to kill another animal, right? Or maybe even take their babies. I mean, the animal kingdom is brutal. Now, in mainstream Christianity, you would say, okay, after the fall of man. And then you get to the idea, okay, God created this world, though. He knew this was going to happen. He knew this is how the world would end up, right? And so there's interesting things there too, but it's like there's a lot of things, it's like even in the dating world too, that say, hey, did a benevolent creator create this material world, right? Which again, there's some crazy shit going on behind me, but again, I don't know, but like what are your thoughts on that exact based on what I said?
I guess that makes my general distrust fairly clear. I do not think that like the demiurge or an evil actor, let's call it just Satan for ease, like created this world. Ultimately, because I think evil is not creation. I mean, I think the reason God is the creator of everything and he's benevolent and he's good, although through our human minds we struggle to see that sometimes, I don't think Satan is the one that created this reality, because when I view evil stuff, it's usually like it's mockery, it's subversion, it's flipping upside down, it's twisting. It's like the shadow to darkness, it comes from the light, but
it's a deviation of the light.
Yes, but it cannot create within itself, right? And so that's why it always has to like twist things, mock things, because it has no creative power.
So
because like I would say, sorry, like I just wanted to like say, like, for an example of that, like there's lots of things that we view morally bad, maybe not morally bad, but we just generally view as bad. Like a lot of people say, like, if God is a good creator, why do babies get cancer?
right,
why am I
etc.
Right. And I think like in order to have a good and just world, and true, like, because that question always leads to, well, why doesn't he just make it all perfect like it was in Eden? But because then we'd have no free will. And that's because like that's the choice, that's the intention aspect of it. Because it's like if we just lived in a perfect world and everything was perfect and we had no way to act outside of that, it would just be a simulation. Right? And the goodness comes from the capacity at any given moment for bad things to happen, but for humans to be able to transcend it in moments. Maybe not all the time, but like I like using the depression example. I've been very depressed in my life at times, and I used to always view that as unfair or bad. And it would draw me away from God, because I was like, look, I mean, if this guy liked me at all, why am I feeling like this? But on the outset, I now realize that the depression was good. I mean, it was there as a signal to say that I'm not living in accordance with what I was put here to do.
Right.
I'm not treating my body the way it should be treated. I'm not treating the people around me the way I should. And it's like this symptom of showing me that exactly. And it's a symptom of showing that the world is wrong. And even though those things can be like horrific in those edge case scenarios, like a baby dying of malaria in Africa,
right,
there has to be both ends.
There's no good without
consequences.
Yeah.
Like if we had rail guards on everything, we'd never be able to do good things.
Like what? Yeah, agreed. Well, what I would ask you though is like, does God have any ability to intervene? Like, does he have ability to bless people, ability to, curse people in a sense, or like, if they're immoral? Does what intervention capabilities do you feel God has in this world? I mean, technically in the Bible, he can do miracles, he can do anything. Like he could save the starving child in Africa if he wanted to, based on his abilities, right? And so where do you, like, in that sense, it's like, okay, does he blesses some people, or like, was that God's will? But then again, the baby with malaria or the starving child, there's thousands and millions of starving children in Africa. Just like, it's like, well, better luck next time or whatever. So
Yeah.
where is the logic there in the sense of lack of intervention?
I mean, one, I don't generally like, I think it's easy to anthropomorphize God for us. I mean, I think we do that just subconsciously because we're trying to put it, in
In a
order
human,
to speak about it, we're trying to
yeah,
put it in a box that we can speak about.
in a human
But like, right,
conscious
yeah.
level.
And
But like
obviously, like, the
with that,
annoying thing,
that's like logic. That's like, okay, we have to use logic and have to use his teachings, but where's the logic there in the sense of why would he create this person, bring them into life essentially, and then give them this life of pure suffering without the ability to come to the truth, never had the opportunity without intervening? Like, why, if he had the power to do that, why wouldn't he? Right now, the Gnostic view explains it very well, but like, how from the Orthodox view, how would you explain that?
I mean, so I'll be real. I've just started going to the Orthodox Church this year, so I'm new to it. I'm not baptized in the faith. I started re-going to church again last year, around a little less than a year ago. Before that, I was like a chronically nihilistic atheist.
Okay.
I was actually, I tell a lie. For a few years, I was on this weird on the fence position to where I was flirting with these ideas, but they hadn't taken any real ground in my thoughts in order to change, the way I lived. But I was like, they were taking seed, I guess you could say. So yeah, I guess I can't speak for the Orthodox faith, but my response would be the kind of the same one as before.
Which
Whereas
is
like,
free will.
yeah, but like, because like there is no good or bad if we're just put in a simulation where everything's predetermined and his
Well,
will is
I
being
agree.
acted.
In
Yeah.
the sorry to interrupt, but in the Gnostic and the Orthodox view, we're not in a simulation,
Right.
right? It's just the Orthodox view would say, essentially, okay, like the point of the demiurge and the point of the basically they say the archons is essentially to feed off our energy, right? Feed off our suffering, right? Our souls in these humans' fleshly bodies, incapable of transcendence, stuck here on this material world until death, where there's an opportunity. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I view it as like there's clearly a thing where we could even make the analogy of the in the gym with resistance training. There needs to be weight and forces against us for us to resist in order for us to grow spiritually, our muscles, right? Like I don't view the weights in the gym that are really heavy to pick up, even though if I go into foolhardy, a few years ago, I had like disc fractures and disc slips from doing a little too much powerlifting. I don't view the weight as bad. I just view it as like it's necessarily there for me to grow. So like the evil in the world, the people farming us, the people spraying things in the sky, the people etc are there, I view as a spiritual opportunity in order for
Right.
us to become better, to do something, to grow, to liberate. Because I don't know if you're a fan of like anime at all.
I'm not. Can I ask you a question though? With that, is would you say that this material, or this world, Earth, is a place for us? Like, what's God's purpose for us here? Is it a place for us to grow? Is it a place for us to
Yeah.
love Him? Like, why would you say we're here?
I mean, I think it's all of the above. I mean, I respect what I think is like the Gnostic approach of like this world or this life is a test in order for us to pass on to the
So
next. And like,
I'll let you continue, but I'll say the Gnostic view is that it's basically a prison, as is like, you breed an animal into a farm, they're captivated there, then they're slaughtered to consume their flesh, essentially,
so
right?
what would be the animal's chance of?
Liberation.
Mhm.
So the animal's chance of liberation is a rescue, right? Someone from the outside to rescue them. The human's chance for liberation is gnosis, which is spiritual truth, to be able to wake up and like see kind of the underlying matrix in a sense, which you
Mhm.
are doing, right? And I am doing. No matter what you believe in, is the seeking for truth. Now, in the Gnostic view, it's okay if you gain enough gnosis. Essentially, your soul is basically awake enough to say, "Hey, I'm not going to come back to this prison planet. I'm going to go back to source." Or you have the choice. I don't get into the nitty gritty of that because you can't use You can't use as much like logic there because we don't know.
Do you not
But
think that leads to a too little emphasis on the here and now and your body?
for sure. So I'll explain. So I've thought about this a lot because the Gnostic view can seem depressing, right? And you would look at me and look at my content, look at my way of life, and you say like, this guy's not depressed at all, right? This
No,
guy
yeah.
loves life, loves nature, loves this planet, honestly. And with that, I basically am doing my best to basically like, with as humbly as possible, both you and me, most people aren't as aware of us, aren't focused on attaining higher consciousness and as deep thinkers as us. And so I've been able to push away the fleshly desires as much as possible. Like right now, I haven't, released, masturbated. My mind's very clean of lust in the past 3 months, not once, right? With my lifestyle, with my desires, I try to keep them very pure. And so I'm living very aligned with what we would both call source or God. And because of that, my life it feels beautiful. I wake up, I'm happy to live. I have purpose. Now, 99% or 95% of people, I would say about 95% of people, you walk into a local Walmart and you can see this, are living in a state of suffering, right? Of pretty heavy suffering. And so my view of this world is that because I've kind of like woken up, especially in the past couple of years, I can now spread that purpose I have of helping others. And that's what makes like life worth living, because that source within us that, we both know we have, that God within us essentially, that's where fulfillment comes from helping others, right? From like being that light. So that's really the only way I say on this world to actually get fulfillment, because everything else is a black hole. You'd agree, like hedonism is a black hole. Instant gratification. The only way is to have fulfillment, whether that's through a relationship, through selfless love, through selfless giving, purpose. And so, but like the amount of people who end up living a life aligned with that, which we're both going for, is very slim. But we've both gotten that kind of revelation and that knowledge to say, hey, this is the path. For you, it's been orthodox. For me, it's been, a mix of Gnosticism, some esoteric stuff, a combination of all of it. But
yeah, no, I mean, like me too. And I'm not like insecurely. I'm not insecure in my faith. Like I love entertaining other stuff, and I love reading and learning about it. Like
have to.
It's like, let the best idea win. I have no issue with that. Yeah, that's all I was going to say. Like,
So,
I have no
answer your
issue. Like, I've dabbled in my esoteric things before, but they haven't bore fruit for me. I also find like I've heard it be said by Jonathan Pageau, who I look up to a lot. He runs the Symbolic World, and he's an Orthodox guy himself. So I take a lot of inspiration from him. He says simply that like religion is what binds, I forget if it's Plato or Socrates, but in order to have two men come together, there needs to be a third higher thing. Otherwise, those two men compete like an animal would. And so whether that, sometimes people will try to make that third thing their nation. We tried that with nationalism. It seems to be that doesn't really quite go high enough. And so the ultimate like contrapolation of that is to just move that higher and higher into something like God,
right,
to ultimately bind people together. And like I do think Christianity has done that to an extent that no other religion has ever done. Obviously it's not perfect. Obviously it's has its fair share of corruption and evils for sure. But the parable or the story of the wedding in the Bible, of like inviting the stranger to the wedding, to this harmony of heaven and earth, I think Christianity does in a new way. And so a lot of times with a lot of the new age stuff, I see it to be mentally powerful for individuals at times. And that's why I don't, because I am also an individual, but I struggle to see how it binds people together into a real community in person, because ultimately, like, the internet's great. It affords amazing things and relationships and conversations, but ultimately, like, I have to leave this room. I have to go out into the real world. I have to be in communion with, other people, a wife, a family, extended family, my local community, my neighbors. And so I guess that's where some of my skepticism comes with, and I don't fully understand Gnosis clearly, but with things like that, how does it bind you to the world at large with other people in a community?
So it's the same thing. There's God, like it doesn't. We both, both of the views see God. Like Gnosticism, say we were both Gnostic, and we're binding on the fact, like we're connecting on the fact that we have slightly different ideologies as far as Christianity goes, right? And so I would slightly disagree with the fact that you need to have the same idea. I think that it definitely binds people, but like you look at Eastern religions, which, a lot of the Eastern philosophies is the God is within, right? Versus the Western philosophies is the God is without, right? And we worship that. But even those Eastern philosophies, a lot of those communities are extremely bound, like, including the meditation retreats. I mean, it's like you can have very spiritual experiences without saying God is without. That's not what I'm saying. And that's not like, I don't think one's right or wrong. But as far as the Gnostic view goes, I think it is very binding. And let me preface this. Sorry if I'm getting a little off track, but
No, you're good.
I'm between the Gnostic view and also, I don't really have a name for this view right now, but like the fact that, okay, there is the one source, God, that we all look up to, right? That's the source of everything. And we're either further or closer to the alignment of that, right? And that's where evil comes from. So like the difference between my two views would be, okay, demiurge evil, God, or God of our souls, good, right? The source of wholeness, etc. Versus one source, evil is just a deviation from that source, right? The closer you get to true love, true selflessness, true wholeness within this human experience, the closer you get to God, right? And so those are and what I do is I go throughout my life, especially being 22, looking at it through, I say, the Gnostic view, right? The Gnostic lens. Haven't really given a name for like the other one. I mean, it's New Age spirituality, whatever, and through that lens. And so, and even like I've looked at world through the lens of Taoism, the lens of Christianity, or Catholicism, Orthodox, looking at it through the lens and saying, hey, through this lens, does this align, right? And I'm not saying one's right or wrong, but that's how like I'm approaching it. And through your lens, the lens you look at the world, Gnosticism doesn't align. It's fine, right? But that's how, I go out. I'm going through my life right now, being young, having a lot more time here on this world. And for me, looking through the Gnostic lens and looking through the lens of like, we all stem from one source, everything's a deviation from that. Those two have been able to are still alive in the sense of, their possibilities in my mind logically. But to answer your question, like we can both bond over the reality that we're living a human experience, trying to achieve gnosis and help each other, free each other from this matrix, right? We can bond over that, which it is very bonding. But we can also bond over our disagreements, which is what we're doing today. Mm-hmm. So yeah, a little rant there, but I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
No, yeah, I mean, maybe you I meant bind people together like a glue.
So where
I view
like
religion in my life a little bit like a glue. And so to give you some context, like years ago, so I'm 27, out of high school, had that granola rock climbing phase, led me into yoga, led me into the more Eastern world. I should also say, from a young age, very fascinated with the Eastern world. Probably just because it was kind of opposite to the Western world, and that's always satisfying. And so always had a big interest in Japan, China. I ended up going to China. I stayed at the Shaolin Monastery. I did Kung Fu. I did like silent and fasted yoga retreats in Nepal.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, and you're not an Eastern person, but I usually, I say you're not an Eastern person. You don't believe in these Eastern things, so I'm not knocking you. But what I found was, and I forget how you phrased this earlier when you were talking about the propositional level of knowledge. People always we have like a propositional tyranny in our world, and people just kind of obsess over this baseline knowledge of like this fact. Deeper than that is the participatory way of knowing the world. And I never felt like I could fully participate in the Eastern world because I was not of it. And it wasn't to say that I don't love those things and I don't enjoy them and I don't still read those books from time to time and gain wisdom from it. But ultimately, in order to participate in something with my real body, it had to be from something, I guess, closer to me, right? And so that's how I ended up getting back into, after testing out all these other spiritual practices, the one I found most productive and most sane without obsessing over it in like in a detrimental way was just going to the Divine Liturgy once a week in the Orthodox Church. Now, the Orthodox Church participation is a little bit more than just once a week. Like they have, Pascha month and they fast and they go to church multiple times a week. So it's a little bit more full on than like your evangelical Protestant, whatever. But I've just found that to be the most productive and most reasonable that kind of binds my life in that way, because it's something I can it's a tradition that as a Western person makes sense, even though it's Eastern, because it's a little like the Eastern Orthodox is east of Rome. So
For sure. Yeah, I think that that's good, and I think that as long as we both agree, as long as your mind doesn't ever get closed to truth seeking, you get closer and closer, because that's the problem. Is if you ever have a way of thinking and you say that thinking is right and another thinking is wrong, right? Because then you close yourself off to gnosis, right? To spiritual truth through knowledge, and gnosis isn't only in Gnosticism, because every religion has gnosis. Everyone feels that connection to God. So as long as you're always seeking gnosis, in my opinion, which is relationship with God, direct knowing, and you keep your mind open, that just human consciousness as a collective, if everyone did that, no matter what religion you are, we'd rise as a human collective, right?
I agree. I wanted to look up the definition of a word that seems to be similar to gnosis, because in the Orthodox tradition, I believe their goal, from what I understand, is theosis,
Hmm.
which is a transformative process to become God, essentially, to become like a God and move closer toward Him in the same way that you're saying it.
So I'm seeing here it says Gnosis simply means knowledge or experiential awareness of God. Gnosticism and Orthodox Christianity are fundamentally opposed. Gnosticism is considered a heresy by the Orthodox Church, though they share some historical roots. So Gnosticism, the path to salvation, is achieved through special secret knowledge reserved for a select few. Orthodox Christianity and I don't agree with that as far as a select few. I think maybe a select few actually get it, but I don't think it's reserved for a select few. Achieved through repentance, sacraments, and the active participation in the church community. That's the path to salvation. Gnosticism, the view of the material world as the physical world is considered evil or a cosmic mistake created by an inferior deity. Demiurge versus Orthodox, creation is fundamentally good and an expression of God's love. Both physical and spiritual aspects matter. View is Jesus. Gnosticism often viewed Jesus as a purely spiritual being who only appeared to deliver hidden wisdom. And then Orthodox believes in the incarnation. Jesus is fully God and fully human, and his physical death and resurrection are central to salvation. So that's there. As far as what did you say was a
Theosis.
the
Theosis.
theosis is the process of becoming united with God and participating in the divine nature by grace, not by nature. So it's considered the ultimate purpose of human life, allowing humans to become by grace what God is by nature.
Because we're made in the image of God, right? And so much of what we're called to do on a microcosm is the same as what He does on a macrocosm.
Yeah.
To name things, like in the Garden of Eden, like we're above a lot of these other animals and things, and we play a role in creation and naming. And so, look, I mean, I know you have your own nuances, so I don't know how much of that you believe, but like, do you not see the potential conflicts of saying that the whole of creation is bad? Because I mean, that's why I guess I had a general reservation about it, or a distrust, was because from what I heard, like cultures that believe in like a Gnostic view often end up leading to like caste systems, and people are locked out of higher levels of participation within the society because, yeah, I mean, I believe India is kind of like that.
So yeah, I don't think India is very Gnostic, but what I would say is that, like, okay, and this is where I align with the Gnostic view. And again, I don't align completely with every single aspect, nor do I know. But the idea of, okay, what is separating us from God? Like, what would you say is like separating us from God? Because like unity is the goal, essentially. I'm seeing here, union without confusion. Like we want to go back to God. We want to be as close in union as possible. What is separating us from union with God here on this earth?
I mean, as a general pattern, I always think it's this battle between the lowest parts of us, maybe the animal, the body, and I mean, like we can see in the kind of the language we use, like ascend or transcend or this like ascension upward out of ourselves. And so it's kind of like this I mean, you can just look at the behavior of Jesus, like by completely denying himself and his ego and his flesh and his, allowing himself to be killed and tortured completely unfairly, even though he had the power to maybe do something about it, ends up flipping it and making him the most powerful thing because he allows it, because he completely denied himself. And so I view it as this like very intense contradiction and like smashing together of opposites. if that makes sense. And
Yeah,
it's like
so
this full hierarchy of like it fills the highest and the lowest into one thing. That's why it's
for
God.
sure.
That's why it's man smashed into one.
So I agree, and that's where like the Gnostic view comes in, is the sense of, okay, Jesus denied what of this material world we have the flesh, right? That's definitely material. That's by definition material. Also, upon being in these material bodies, we get the ego, the identity, right? The identity of I am me, you are you, right? The inherent separation between you and me is the fact that I'm Joey and you're Zach, right? And so the ego and the flesh is what separates us from God. Now you take away essentially the ego and you take away the flesh, you're left with your soul, like spirit, right? Your essence. Now that's what, like, in Gnosticism, that's like God. That's the source, basically the energy that's trapped within these physical bodies. Now, that's what Jesus was teaching, which is, you just said, complete denial of the flesh and the ego, right? Now, the material world is the flesh and the ego. And so it's like, okay, if we're supposed
But
to...
sorry to just
Go ahead.
quickly,
ahead.
he denied it fully, but he also accepted it fully.
For sure.
So
And so
I don't know,
for
that's
me,
confusing. But
and
yeah, keep
that's,
going.
for me, that's what you have to do. So for, like, I don't deny the ego. I had a phase where I was like trying to like eliminate the ego, whether it's just with psychedelics, with deep meditation, to say, let me eliminate it. I can't. I'm human, right? I'm here on this planet. In my, and if I look at it through the Gnostic lens, you would say prison planet, but I'm here on this planet. I have the ego and the flesh. And so the goal is to get to know it as intimately as possible. And to, what I always say is, to enslave the ego to your soul's desires. That's what I try to do, right? Is to basically align my identity with the desire of my higher self in as pure form as possible. So basically, I just reinforce the idea that I will have as most satisfaction when I am as selfless as possible. And I try to, it's impossible to get 100% there. That's enlightenment. But that is the essential idea, which is that, okay, the full realization of what our ego, what our flesh, what our soul is, and Jesus basically pointing out that the flesh and the ego are not of God, right? They're separating us from God, is kind of the idea of, okay, we're here in this earth where we're separate from God inherently by being here, by being in these material bodies. And the goal is to kind of awaken to that, and awaken to, in the Gnostic view, and gain gnosis, spiritual experience through understanding, or spiritual knowledge through experience, to basically awaken. That's the Gnostic view, and that's where it aligns with me, because it's like, how can I be one with God if I'm me and God is God? Or if I have this body, if I'm here and you're there, right? Oneness, union, means there's lack of separation by definition, right? And so, like, we're separate here on this planet. And so that's why, like, why would it's hard for me to find why God would want to separate us from him here. Maybe for the idea for us to learn, right? Or for him to love us. But it doesn't seem like we're optimized, free will aside. This world is optimized for us to love God, or why God would need our love, essentially, in the sense
But
of...
maybe that's what makes it so good,
Explain.
And that comes back to like the fundamental presuppositional, I guess, difference we have. But I view it all as good. And shoot, where was I going to go with that?
Well, would you say the ego? Would you say the ego?
Yeah, I think it's there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think everything is there for a reason. And I was going to bring up anime earlier, because a lot of in anime tropes today, and like in the recent 10, 20 years, and you could call it like a collective subconscious, like oftentimes art, movies, paintings are trying to articulate things beyond us that we haven't yet come into touch with. And we're kind of like grasping with them in this creative world. Not all of them, obviously. Some of them are like, I got reincarnated as a slime and everyone has huge tits. Like, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. But a lot of anime tropes, a lot of movie tropes in general, have this like intensification of evil. Like, usually the hero finds himself, like maybe even in like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, the hero finds himself in the worst point of reality thus far, where the villain has the most power and the most dominion over the world, which then calls him to become the greatest good. And so, yeah, the worse the world is, the better the opportunity we have to become to overcome it, to overthrow it for the good.
Right. Well, the more
So I do view that as good. It does crush people, like in the same way of the weight analogy that we used earlier. It doesn't mean that you can just walk in the gym and throw 700 pounds on your back for the first time and expect to be okay. But it's, yeah, like this relational aspect where it, you know.
Yeah, I got you. And this has been amazing. We do have to wrap up. We'll finish off with maybe one more topic here. And I would say it's like, as far as animal agriculture goes, in the sense of like, it's hard for us to comprehend 80 billion or, 80 billion land animals and 2 trillion fish being killed a year, 3,000 a second. Like, think about 3,000 human beings, right? Like, try to comprehend the size of that. And then think about every second. So by the time I'm finished with the sentence, 15,000 would be slaughtered, right? That's like this. It's like, that's insane to think about. And so it's like, why does God, especially because, I mean, most people, I think yourself would say that these animals have a level of consciousness, not human consciousness, but they feel pain, they feel emotion. If you ever had a dog, it's has a level of consciousness. 3,000 a second are being slaughtered for most of it, a majority of it, considering we don't need to eat it for most people. And a lot of it's factory farmed, is for human greed and gluttony. And it's like, would God look upon this creation and have the ability to intervene that or awaken people to say, hey, let's make better choices, but decides just to have no intervention with that? Like, what would be your view there?
Well, you're woken up to it, aren't you?
Yes, I would say.
And I think a fair few amount of people are. In the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, God said he'll save the city if he can. Basically, he gets in a bargaining with God, and he says, God was like, if you can find 50 people, I won't destroy the city. He whittles him down, and I actually forget the number, but it's something small, like 5 or 3 or 1 person. God's like, if you can find one more person that is good, I won't lay this city. And he couldn't find anyone good. And so, I mean, I think history is written oftentimes by a small number of people, awoken people maybe, that actually do something about it. And maybe that is God's intervention through the world.
Would you say though that then this world isn't created by a benevolent being? If like, because in that sense you're saying, okay, wow, humanity is so rotten that they couldn't even find 5 people, 50 people to come to this realization, or we're so ignorant. Like, the level of ignorance is diabolical, and the level of unnecessary suffering is diabolical.
I think it happens. Like, yeah, I mean, I think like in certain cases in history, certain places get so bad that basically everyone dies,
Yeah.
And that intensifies so much until they're like, oh, we can't do this anymore. Like, the world has a shape and it will speak to you when you go against it. But I'm curious, and we'll wrap it up, I promise.
It's all good.
Do you think your conscious awareness of, or maybe focus on the suffering of the animals dying, leads you to a nihilistic place where you think this world is created by a demiurge?
So for me, it's the nihilism isn't. I don't feel nihilistic, because I look at it, and if anyone allows themselves to actually comprehend the pure suffering, no matter what belief you have about the world, just the reality of the pure suffering of these animals, like, you could take it's a lot harder to look at it at a large scale sense. But like, do you have a dog?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
Okay. So it's like, I'm not going to get emotional here. I've gotten emotional on like other podcasts with this, but you take your dog. Is it a male or a female?
It's a girl.
It's a girl. Now you imagine, and do you mind if I get a little bit graphic here?
Yeah, go for it.
So do you take that dog, right? And you imagine someone else impregnating her, right? And the person impregnates her. Now the babies are had, the babies are taken. Your dog mourns for those babies heavily. Now, the reason they were birthed is so that your dog's milk could be taken, essentially. And so, the dog's plugged up to a machine where it's milked for about 9 months until it's ready for another impregnation cycle, right? That dog's impregnated again, the babies are taken again, and this happens about 9 births until your dog is too spent to even walk, and then it's sent to slaughter for meat, right? Now, imagining that happening to your dog is just like horrific.
No, yeah.
Horrific. Now, to imagine that happening to the amount of animals it's happening on this world, yeah, it's brutal. Like, if anyone allows them, like, imagine that times millions and millions. However, a higher level of consciousness wouldn't let that bring them down, because you realize, hey, I'm going to control the controllables. By letting that, affect me means that, hey, I can't make the difference that I want to make. I can't actually do something about it if I let it corrupt my mind, right? And so that's where I say, hey, I'm aware. Like, ignorance, like, I can't live in it. like it's too uncomfortable for me to live in ignorance. And there's some places I'm ignorant. I'm not fully enlightened, but I'm not ignorant of what happens in this world. But at the same time, I don't let it bring me down, because I wouldn't be able to exist in a world or do the good things I want to do if I did. And so I don't have that nihilistic view. I try to have an objective view as much as possible. And the objective view is, yeah, bad things happen, but we have the ability to help it and make the world a better place. And if you dwell on them or you let them lower your frequency, essentially, you can't do that. So that's my view, essentially. And as far as the Gnostic idea is that I just like, okay, sure, we're in a prison planet. Let's escape. Let's gain consciousness. There's still joy. We still have our souls. We still have the God within us. The beautiful parts. That's like the beautiful experience where we experience love, connection, purpose, growth. Right. That's our souls feeling fulfilled. Let's go for that, and that's a life well lived. At the same time, let's gain that gnosis and escape. Get higher consciousness, go back to heaven or go back to source, whatever you think. Help others do the same. You could still live that fulfillment. And so I don't find like depression or a sadness in that. I find liberation, because what I do find depressing is being able to look at the world and saying, this makes no sense to me, which, some things I've looked in the past, like I don't like living in things that don't make sense. I'd rather have an uncomfortable truth that allows me understanding, in a sense. I kind of ranted there, but
that was great. And I completely agree. Look, I mean, you're a fascinating person to talk to, and I could talk for a lot longer, but I think for both of our times, I think we should just end it. Let's do it again in the future.
100%, man. This is so cool.
So I am probably going to film like 5 or 6 episodes over the next coming weeks, and then I'm going to start releasing them in a kind of chronological order. So I don't know necessarily when this will be out. I want to say around a month, because I'll probably do 1 episode a week for a little bit, but I'm also going to chop this up into little clips.
Sure.
That I'll share with you, and you can share with your audience. But no, this conversation was fascinating. I'll be following along your page. I love your content.
You as well.
I appreciate your time and your words of wisdom.
You as well. I'm gonna get a snapshot for the story. So give it a thumbs up. You or a smile, whatever you want to do. Cool. Yeah, brother, it was a pleasure. Let's keep in touch. I highly respect everything you do. And
you as well.
What'd you say? I love what you said in the beginning of this. What was the I'm gonna save that, the Roman or whatever. The Greek.
Yeah. The Greek, the two ways to have a discussion. Phila Nikeia, Phila meaning the love, Nikeia meaning of victory, like the god of victory, and then Philosophia, which is the love of wisdom. So yeah, I mean, I think that I hope carried through in the conversation, because when people just talk past each other, and it happens when people disagree with things, and there's this cognitive dissonance where they can't see past it and they're just arguing past each other. That's not entertaining for anyone, including myself. And so yeah, Philosophia. Just try to learn.
I think that was a very Philosophia conversation, if you ask me.
I think so as well.
I definitely have gained some wisdom with your perspective. So yeah, bro, it was a pleasure, and we'll keep in touch. Yeah.
Yeah. Have a good one, bro. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. See ya.